Welcome to the third video from section 1.3. We're going to continue our work with equivalent rational numbers. Just a reminder of the learning objectives for this lesson. You should already have these from the first two videos, but it never hurts to show them again. So we finished off last video with creating equivalent fractions by simplifying and multiplying. Well, there are other types of fractions too. Sometimes when working with fractions, you use numbers which consist of a whole number and a fraction. This is called a mixed number. For example, if a recipe calls for more than 1 cup of flour but less than 2 cups, you need to use a mixed number to describe exactly how much flour you need. A mixed number is written as a whole number with a fraction to the right of it. Some mixed numbers include 1 1/2 or 2 2/3. When the numerator of a fraction is greater than or equal to the denominator, you have an improper fraction. Improper fractions are always greater than or equal to 1. So here's a few examples of improper fractions. You got 2 over 2, 3 over 3, and 10 over 10. Those are all improper fractions that equal 1. Well, why does this happen? Well, to understand this, you have to think about what the numerator and the denominator mean. The denominator is how many parts the whole is divided into, and the numerator is how many of those parts you have. So if you have 2 out of 2 total parts, then you've got the whole thing. Okay, so now we've got fractions like 5/2, 8/3, 11/4. Those are all fractions that are greater than 1. So these are called improper fractions. Okay, mixed numbers and improper fractions can be equivalent or equal to each other. Improper fractions can be written as mixed numbers by dividing the numerator by the denominator and keeping the remainder as the new numerator while keeping the same denominator. Mixed numbers can be rewritten as improper fractions by multiplying the whole number in the mixed number by the denominator and then adding the product to the numerator. So for an example here, 9/2 is equal to 4 1/2. And we can tell that by doing if we do 9 divided by 2, I get 4 with a remainder of 1, and then I still keep my denominator. Okay, so if I start with 9/2, I get to 4 1/2 because 2 goes into 9 4 times with a remainder of 1, and my denominator stays at 2. Otherwise, if I do 4 1/2, okay, I can rewrite that as an improper fraction by multiplying the whole number, which is 4, times the denominator, 2, and then adding the numerator. So 4 times 2 is 8, plus 1 is 9, and I keep the denominator the same. So we can see that 9/2 and 4 1/2 are in fact equal. Okay, so another example here, we're going to write 3 2/3 as an improper fraction. Now remember, to write a mixed number as an improper fraction, we first multiply the whole number, which in this case is 3, by the denominator in the fraction. So we're going to take 3 times 3, and we're going to get 9. Next, we add this number to the numerator of the fraction. So 9 plus 2 is 11. We put this new number over the original denominator, and we have our improper fraction. So the answer is that 3 2/3 can be written as the improper fraction 11/3. It may help you think of it this way. If 3 1/3 is 1, and we have a whole number of 3's, we also have 3/3 plus 3/3 plus 3/3. That gets us that whole number of 3 plus the 2/3, and we add our numerators. 3 plus 3 plus 3 plus 2 gives me 11. So I'd have 11/3. Okay, so what I want you to do now, pause the video and then solve this question on the bottom. So write 7/3 as a mixed number. So go ahead and pause, get an answer, and then you can hit play and see how you did. Okay, so if we take 7 divided by 3, I get an answer of 2, and I've got a remainder of 1. So that remainder of 1 goes over my denominator of 3, giving me a mixed number of 2 1/3. Go ahead and give these 3 problems a try. Pause the video, work through these. We're going to simplify 10/12. We're going to create an equivalent fraction for 5 over 6, and we're going to write 15 over 2 as a mixed number. So pause the video, get these 3 problems done, then hit play and see how you did. Okay, to simplify 10 over 12, I notice that I can take a 2 out of both 10 and 12. So if I divide the top and the bottom by 2, I get my fraction of 5/6. Now for the second one, create an equivalent fraction for 5/6. We can't simplify it, so we can't divide the top and the bottom by anything, so we would have to multiply to get an equivalent fraction. You can multiply the top and the bottom by whatever number you want to. I chose the number 3 to give me 15 over 18. And finally, writing 15 halves as a mixed number. 15 divided by 2 gives me 7 with a remainder of 1. So my mixed number would be 7 and then 1 over the denominator of 2 that I had at the beginning. So my answer would be 7 1/2. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to compare and order fractions and mixed numbers with and without approximation. So now that we are able to look at a fraction, you can compare and order them. In order to be exact when comparing and ordering fractions, you have to find a common denominator for all of these fractions. Then compare or order the fractions by looking at the value of the numerator. This will give you an exact comparison. Okay, let's look at another way to compare. Okay, so they want us to use approximation to put all of these in order. So we've got 7/8, 2/5, 3 5/8, 1 over 29, and 29 over 30. Okay, from greatest to least. Okay, so if we look at these, 4 of these fractions, the 7/8, the 2/5, the 1 over 29, and the 29 over 30, those are all smaller than 1. There's only one that's larger than 1, and that's this 3 5/8. So that is obviously going to be our largest number. Now when it goes with the rest of the fractions, generally how close the numerator and the denominator are will tell you how close to 1 it is. So numbers like 7/8 and 29/30, the top number is pretty close to the bottom. So that means that the fraction is pretty close to 1. However, with these other two, the 2/5 and the 1 over 29, the numerators aren't as close, so therefore those are farther away from 1. The farthest one is 1 over 29. And so with that being the case, we know that 1 over 29 is going to be our smallest number. Okay. And then from there, 2 over 5 is the next smallest, because again, 2 is less than half of 5. And if we look at what's remaining, 7 is not less than half of 8, and 29 is not less than half of 30. From there, you'll notice that 29 over 30 and 7 over 8, the top is still only 1 away from the bottom. But another thing is the size of the numbers will also tell you how close it is to 1. The larger the numbers are, and with them being close together, the closer it is to 1. So 29 over 30 is going to be closer to 1 than 7 over 8. Yes, they're only 1 apart, top and bottom, but since 29 and 30 are bigger, that means the fraction is equal to a number closer to 1. So it should look something like this. Some review before we finish up the video. Compare 2/3 and 5/7. Okay, so now we're going to be using the greater than, the less than, or the equal to. Now we've got fractions that do not have the same denominator. So what I would need to do is I would need to find a common denominator. So to do that, I look at my two denominators. I've got 3 and 7. The number that they have in common, the least common multiple of the two, would be 21. So I multiply both fractions, top and bottom, by whatever it is that would make our denominator 21. On the top one, it would be 7. On the bottom, it would be 3. So 2 times 7 is 14. 3 times 7 is 21. 5 times 3 is 15. 7 times 3 is 21. So what they're asking us to do is they're asking us to compare 14 over 21 with 15 over 21. And when the denominators are the same, which they are, we look at the numerators. 14 is smaller than 15, which tells us that we would use the less than symbol here. So this would be our inequality. So with that in mind, go ahead and pause the video and answer these 3 questions before hitting play and seeing how you did. So as you can see in this first one, I've got the fractions 1/3 and 5/6. My least common multiple of my denominators is going to be 6. So if I take 1/3 and turn it into 6, that would be 2/6, and 2/6 is less than 5/6. For the next one, I've got 2/9 and 7/11. My least common multiple for 9 and 11 is 99. So I would multiply 2/9 by 11, and I would multiply 7/11 by 9, giving me 22/99 and 63/99. 22/99 is less than 63/99. The final one, I've got 8/9 and 3/4. My least common multiple for my denominators is 36. So instead of 8/9, I would have 32/36. Instead of 3/4, I would have 27/36. And so my answer would be that 32/36 is greater than 27/36.